I walked into the courtroom with the specific kind of energy that usually makes grown men adjust their ties and check their consciences. I don't walk in there to make friends. I don't walk in there to be liked. I walk in there to find the truth. And usually, the truth is buried under 6 feet of nonsense, excuses, and bad attitudes. Today, the air in the room felt heavy, charged with that electric static you get right before a thunderstorm. Bird looked at me, gave a subtle nod, and called the case. Docket number 442. Plaintiff is suing for unpaid services and breach of contract. Defendant is countersuing for emotional distress and harassment. I paused, adjusting my glasses as I looked down at the paperwork. Harassment. That's the new favorite word for people who don't like being asked to pay their bills. I looked up. On my left stood the plaintiff, a man named Arthur Miller. He looked like he'd been awake for 3 days straight. Dust on his work boots, calluses on his hands, holding a stack of invoices that shook slightly in his grip. He was a working man. I know the type. They do the job, they expect the check, and when the check doesn't come, they panic because the mortgage doesn't wait for excuses. On my right stood the defendant, Mrs. Elena Sterling. If entitlement had a scent, she would have smelled like a perfume factory explosion. She was wearing a white Chanel suit that probably cost more than Mr. Miller's truck. Her hair was pulled back in a bun so tight I was surprised she could close her eyes, and she was currently inspecting her fingernails as if the proceedings of this court were a minor inconvenience between her brunch and her spa appointment. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the plaintiff. She looked bored. I hate bored. Bored in my courtroom means you think you're above the law. Mrs. Sterling, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. She didn't look up immediately. She took a slow breath, finished inspecting her cuticle, and then finally deigned to turn her head toward the bench. Yes? Yes is not the answer, I snapped. The answer is yes, Your Honor. And take your sunglasses off your head. You're in a courtroom, not the Hamptons. Put them down. She blinked, clearly stunned that someone was speaking to her without a curtsy attached. She slowly reached up, removed the oversized designer's shades, and placed them on the podium with a clatter that echoed in the silent room. She offered a tight, plastic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Miller. I turned my attention to the plaintiff, ignoring her attitude for the moment. I wanted the facts first. I'd deal with the personality later. You claim you did work for this woman. What kind of work? I'm a landscape architect, Your Honor, Miller said, his voice steadying. Mrs. Sterling hired my firm to redesign the gardens at her estate in Greenwich. We did a complete overhaul, imported Japanese maples, installed a koi pond, custom stone, pathways, the works. The contract was for $85,000. And how much has she paid you? I asked, pen poised. $5,000. The deposit. That's it. $80,000 outstanding, I repeated, looking over at Mrs. Sterling, who was now checking her watch. Mrs. Sterling, did he do the work? She let out a sigh that sounded like a tire deflating. He did something, she said, waving a hand dismissively. But it wasn't what I envisioned. It lacked soul. It lacked the aesthetic vibration I was looking for. My husband and I are very particular people, Judge. We don't pay for mediocrity. Mediocrity? I shot back. I'm looking at photos here. I held up the evidence submitted by the plaintiff. This looks like the Garden of Eden. What exactly was wrong with the vibration of the koi pond? Did the fish have bad attitudes? The gallery chuckled. I didn't smile. It's not about the fish, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. It's about the energy. Mr. Miller's energy is frantic, desperate. He brought that frantic energy onto my property. I told him I cannot pay for this negative aura. I told him to rip it all out and start over. He refused. So you kept the garden, I asked, leaning forward. Well, yes. It would have been too much hassle to remove it immediately. So you have the Japanese maples? Yes. You have the custom stone pathways? Yes. You have the fish swimming in the pond? I suppose. Then you pay for them. I slammed my hand on the desk. This isn't a spiritual retreat, Mrs. Sterling. This is a contract case. You don't get to keep $80,000 worth of merchandise because you don't like the man's aura. Do you go to the grocery store, eat the steak, and then tell the butcher you're not paying because he looked stressed out? She stiffened. Her face turned a shade of pink that clashed with her lipstick. You don't understand who I am, she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming icy. My husband is Richard Sterling. We own half the commercial real estate in this city. We don't deal with petty tradesmen who don't understand luxury. I don't care if your husband owns the moon and the stars, I said, my voice rising. In this room, you are a defendant who owes money. And let me tell you something else you countersued for harassment. Why? Because he asked you to pay your bill? He called me, she exclaimed, acting as if this was a war crime. He called my personal cell phone. During dinner, he sent emails. He showed up at the gate asking to speak to the house manager. It was embarrassing. It was uncouth. It's called trying to collect a debt, I shouted. He has employees to pay. He has supplies to buy. You think the world runs on your schedule? You think because you have money, you get to step on people? Not in here. Not today. I looked at Mr. Miller. Did she sign the contract? Yes, Your Honor. Right here. He pushed a paper forward. I snatched it up. It was signed in broad, sweeping blue ink. Elena Sterling. Is that your signature? I asked her, holding it up. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck in her head. I sign a lot of things. I have assistants who put things in front of me. I assume they vetted the help. The help? I narrowed my eyes. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mr. Miller is a business owner. He is a professional. He is not the help. And you are not the Queen of England. You are a woman who signed a contract and is trying to wiggle out of it because you think you're too important to pay your debts. I'm not wiggling, she snapped, her composure cracking just a fraction. I am refusing to be swindled by a charlatan who promised me paradise and gave me a suburban backyard project. And quite frankly, I don't appreciate your tone. I came here to resolve this civilly, not to be berated by a civil servant. The room went dead silent. Bird stopped chewing his gum. I slowly took off my glasses. I placed them gently on the desk. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the insecurity masked by the diamonds. I saw the cruelty masked by the manners. A civil servant? I repeated quietly. Yes, she said, lifting her chin, thinking she had scored a point. That's what you are, isn't it? You work for the public. My taxes pay your salary. So technically, you work for me. I let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. Madam, I said, let's get a few things straight before you embarrass yourself further. I don't work for you. I work for the truth. And your taxes? I bet my lunch money you haven't paid your fair share of taxes since the Reagan administration, but that's between you and the IRS. Right now, the only thing that matters is that you are standing there, draped in arrogance, thinking you can bully this man and bully this court. I am not bullying anyone, she yelled, losing the cool facade entirely. I am the victim here. I have suffered emotional distress having to deal with this peasant coming to my home. Peasant? I stood up. Bird. Did she just say peasant? She sure did, Judge, Bird said, crossing his arms. You are a piece of work, lady, I said, shaking my head. You think because you have a black card you have character? You have no character. Mr. Miller built you a garden. You kept it. You're enjoying it, and you're going to pay for it. Every single dime. She slammed her designer bag onto the podium. I will not. I will appeal this. I will have your job. Do you know who my friends are? I can make one phone call and have you disbarred. I sat back down and leaned into the microphone. A smile crept onto my face. A shark's smile. Oh, you want to make phone calls? You want to threaten me? You think you can intimidate me? I chuckled. Mrs. Sterling, I've been judging cases since before you were figuring out which fork to use for the salad. You don't scare me. You annoy me. And do you know what I do when I get annoyed? She glared at me, her chest heaving. You're just a bitter old woman, she spat out. You're jealous. That's what this is. You're jealous of my life, my money, my status. You're sitting there in a black robe while I wear couture. You're nothing. You're absolutely worthless compared to me. The word hung in the air. Worthless. The audience gasped. Even Mr. Miller looked terrified. I didn't blink. I didn't shout. I just looked at her with a calmness that was far more terrifying than any scream. Worthless, I repeated. Yes, she hissed. Worthless. I picked up my pen. I looked at the file. Then I looked back at her. Mrs. Sterling, I said, my voice dangerously low, you just made the biggest mistake of your life? You think this is a game? You think this is a reality show where you get to throw wine and walk away? You just insulted this court, you insulted the judicial process, and you proved to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are a liar and a cheat. I turned to the plaintiff. Mr. Miller, how much was the interest clause in your contract for late payments? 10% per month, Your Honor, he stammered. And did you sue for that? No, I just wanted the principal. I just wanted to be paid for the work. Well, today is your lucky day, I said, not taking my eyes off Mrs. Sterling. Because I am amending your complaint. You are entitled to every legal remedy available within this contract. Mrs. Sterling's jaw dropped. You can't do that! I can do whatever I want. It's my courtroom, I barked. And I'm not done. You want to see worthless? I'm going to show you what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. You think you can come in here and insult me? You think you can treat people like dirt? Not on my watch. I checked the clock. We were just getting started. She thought the worst was over. She thought she had just insulted me, and that was it. She had no idea that I was about to dissect her financial life, her distress claims, and her arrogance, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the truth. Bird, I said, get the bailiff ready. I have a feeling Mrs. Sterling is going to have trouble controlling herself when she hears what happens next. She let out a scoff. Please, you can't touch me. Watch me, I said. And that was just the beginning. Watch me, I said again, letting the words settle like concrete. I turned back to the plaintiff, Mr. Miller. He looked like he'd just witnessed a car crash and wasn't sure if he should call 911 or applaud. Mr. Miller, I said, voice calm but clipped. You said you didn't sue for the interest initially. Why? He shifted his weight, wringing his hands. Honestly, Judge, I just wanted to get paid and move on. I didn't want to provoke them. I have other jobs, other clients. I didn't want the trouble. The trouble, I echoed, glancing at Mrs. Sterling. You mean you didn't want her calling you a peasant again? You didn't want her threatening your livelihood? Exactly. I nodded. It was the answer I expected. Bullies rely on decent people being too polite or too scared to fight back. I turned my laser focus back to the defendant. She was currently whispering furiously to someone on her phone, shielding the screen with her hand. Put the phone away, I shouted. She jumped, nearly dropping the device. I am contacting my attorney. This is a kangaroo court. You are biased. I am biased against liars, I shot back. And right now, you're the biggest one in the room. Put the phone away or I'll have Bird confiscated and you can pick it up at the Lost and Found in 6 months. Do you understand me? She shoved the phone into her bag with a huff. Fine, but my lawyer will be hearing about this. I'm sure he will. He probably charges you $500 an hour to listen to you whine. Now, let's talk about your countersuit. Emotional distress. I picked up her counterclaim paperwork as if it were a dirty tissue. You claim Mr. Miller's attempts to collect his money caused you, let me see here, sleepless nights, anxiety, and a disruption of your chakra alignment. I looked over my glasses at her. Are you serious? Yes, she said defiantly. Stress is a killer, Judge, my doctor said. I don't care what your doctor said unless he's here to testify, and I don't see him. I see you, and you look pretty well rested to me. You look like someone who sleeps very soundly on sheets made of Egyptian cotton paid for by stiffing working people. That is slander, she shrieked. It's an observation, I retorted. Now, tell me about this harassment. You said he came to your gate. Did he threaten you? Did he have a weapon? Did he scream profanities? He was aggressive, she said, searching for a word. He was loud. He told the guard he wasn't leaving until he got a check. It was frightening. I turned to Miller. Is that true? Did you refuse to leave? I waited at the gate for 20 minutes, Judge, Miller said, looking exasperated. The guard called the house. They said she wasn't home. I saw her car in the driveway. I saw her walking in the garden. I told the guard, I know she's in there. Just ask her for the check. Then the police came. You called the police? I asked Mrs. Sterling, eyebrows raised. Of course I did. There was a strange man refusing to leave my property. A strange man? He's the man you hired. He's the man who spent 3 months digging up your dirt. He's not a stranger. He's your creditor. I leaned forward. You called the police on a man trying to get paid for work you admit he did. That is a waste of police resources. That is malicious. It was for my safety, she insisted. Baloney, I yelled. It was for your ego. You wanted to show him who's boss. You wanted to see him humiliated. You wanted him to know that you can snap your fingers and men with badges will show up to remove the nuisance. Well, guess what? You're in my house now. And here, the badges work for me. I flipped through the evidence photos again. Mr. Miller, I see a text message log here. Who submitted this? I did, Your Honor, Miller said. I scanned the document. It was a printout of text messages between Miller and Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling, the final invoice is past due. Please advise on payment. Sterling, stop texting me. I am in street tropez. Do not ruin my vacation. It's been 3 months. I need to pay my suppliers. You are so tedious. If you text me again, I will block you and you will get nothing. I read the last one out loud. If you text me again, I will block you and you will get nothing. I looked up at her. Is this you? She hesitated. I was under a lot of stress. Is this you? I repeated, louder. Yes, but he was bothering me. He was bothering you? You owed him $80,000 and you were in street tropez. I slapped the paper down. Do you know what tedious is, Mrs. Sterling? Tedious is listening to a spoiled woman try to justify theft, because that's what this is. When you take goods and services and refuse to pay for them, it's theft. You stole from him. I did not steal. I intend to pay eventually when I am satisfied. You've had the garden for 6 months. Are the trees dead or the stones cracking? No, but then you are satisfied. Satisfaction is objective in contract law, not subjective based on your mood swings. The job is done. The product is delivered. You pay. She crossed her arms, looking away. I don't have the liquidity right now. My assets are tied up. The courtroom went quiet again. I let out a long, low whistle. Ah, I said, a smile touching my lips. Now we get to the truth. The liquidity. The assets are tied up. I looked at her white suit, her jewelry, her manicure. So let me get this straight. You're rich on paper. You're rich in your mind. But in reality, you're broke. Her head snapped back around. I am not broke. How dare you? We have millions in property. Property isn't cash, madam. You can't pay the landscaper with a brick from your building. You're playing a shell game. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And Mr. Miller here is Peter. You're living a champagne lifestyle on a tap water budget. And you're using people like him to subsidize it. That is a lie, she screamed. We are very wealthy. Then write him a check, I challenged. Right now, pull out your checkbook and write him a check for $80,000. If you're so wealthy, it should be nothing. It's pocket change, right? She froze. Her hand didn't move toward her bag. She stared at me, eyes wide, trapped. I don't carry my checkbook, she stammered. Of course you don't, I said dryly. Because if you wrote that check, it would bounce so high it would hit the ceiling tiles. That's the real reason you didn't pay him. It wasn't the aura. It wasn't the vibration. It wasn't the mediocrity. It was because you didn't have the money. I have the money, she insisted, her voice cracking. It's just moved around. It's complicated. It's not complicated. It's simple. You're a fraud. The word hit her like a physical blow. She actually took a step back. Mr. Miller, I said, turning away from her. How much did you spend on materials alone? About $40,000, Judge. I put it on my credit cards. I'm paying interest on it right now. So you're in debt because she wants to play pretend millionaire, I summarized. Yes, Your Honor. I looked back at Mrs. Sterling. She was trying to regain her composure, smoothing her jacket, fixing her hair. She was trying to put the mask back on. Mrs. Sterling, I said, you called me worthless. You said I was a bitter old woman. You said I was jealous of you. She didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead. Let me tell you something about worth, I continued, my voice steady. Worth isn't what you wear. It isn't what you drive. It isn't the zip code you live in. Worth is your word. Worth is your integrity. Worth is looking a man in the eye and paying him what you owe him. Mr. Miller has worth. He works hard. He honors his contracts. He supports his family. I pointed a finger at her. You have a closet full of expensive clothes and an empty soul. You have a bank account full of IOUs and a reputation that's about to be mud. You are the poorest person in this room. She finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw tears. Not sad tears, angry tears. Tears of humiliation. You have no right to speak to me like that, she whispered. I have every right, I said, because I'm the judge. And today, judgment is coming. I looked down at my docket. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $80,000. Wait, she cried out. I can't pay that all at once. I need a payment plan. Silence, I ordered. I'm not finished. I looked at Mr. Miller. I am also awarding the plaintiff the maximum interest allowed by law, calculated from the date of the first invoice. That's another, let's call it $5,000. And, I added, looking straight at Mrs. Sterling, I am dismissing your countersuit with prejudice. It is frivolous. It is a waste of the court's time. And frankly, it's an insult to anyone who has ever actually been harassed. But, and I raised my voice, cutting her off. Because you admitted in open court that you called the police falsely to intimidate a creditor, I am forwarding the transcript of these proceedings to the district attorney's office in Greenwich. Filing a false police report is a crime, Mrs. Sterling. Let's see how your assets handle a criminal defense attorney. Her face went white, ghost white. The arrogance evaporated instantly, leaving behind just fear. You wouldn't. I would. I just did. Bird, mark it. Marked, Bird said with a grin. Now, I said, closing the folder with a satisfying thud. You said I was worthless. I just cost you $85,000 and a potential criminal investigation. That seems like a pretty significant impact for a worthless old woman, doesn't it? I stood up. The room stood with me. Mr. Miller, you'll get your money. If she doesn't pay, you execute on that judgment. You put a lien on her house. You garnish her husband's bank accounts. You take those Japanese maples back if you have to. Do not let her get away with a penny. Thank you, Your Honor, Miller said, looking like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. I looked at Mrs. Sterling one last time. She was slumped against the podium, defeated, small. Get out of my courtroom, I said. I turned and walked out the door, robes flowing behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. The sound of a bully deflating. As I reached my chambers, I heard Bird's voice booming over the noise of the gallery. Parties are excused. I sat down at my desk, took a sip of water, and smiled. Not bad for a morning's work. I sat in my chambers, the adrenaline of the courtroom slowly ebbing away, replaced by the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Usually, after a case like that, I move on. Next docket, next dispute, next liar. But Mrs. Sterling, she stuck with me. Not because she was unique. I've seen 1,000 women like her, draped in labels and entitlement, but because of that word, worthless. It wasn't just an insult, it was a worldview, a philosophy. People like her truly believed that anyone who served, anyone who worked, anyone who wasn't in their tax bracket was simply scenery in the movie of their lives, disposable, worthless. There was a knock on the door. It was Jerry, my producer. Judge, he said, poking his head in. You okay? That was intense. I'm fine, Jerry, I said, picking up a file for the afternoon session. Just taking out the trash. Well, the trash is still in the hallway, he said, grimacing. Mrs. Sterling is refusing to leave. She's demanding to speak to you. She says there's been a misunderstanding. I lowered the file. My eyes narrowed. She's still here? Yeah. She's making a scene with the bailiffs, says she has new evidence she forgot to present. Something about the contract being void because she signed it under duress. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. Duress? Was Mr. Miller holding a gun to her head? Or was the duress that the ink color didn't match her purse? She's threatening to go to the press, Judge. Says she's going to tell everyone you were prejudiced because you, don't like rich people. I stood up. Is that so? I walked past Jerry, out of my chambers, and back toward the courtroom entrance. I didn't go back to the bench. I went to the hallway. There she was. Mrs. Sterling was surrounded by two bailiffs, her arms flailing, her face flushed. Mr. Miller was standing off to the side, looking uncomfortable, clutching his judgment paperwork like a shield. I demand to see the judge, she was screaming. This is a violation of my civil rights. I was not given a fair chance to explain the holistic nature of the dispute. Mrs. Sterling, my voice cracked through the hallway like a whip. She spun around, her eyes widened. She clearly hadn't expected me to actually come out. Judge Judy, she gasped, quickly composing herself, smoothing her skirt. Thank goodness these brutes were trying to remove me. I need to speak with you, privately. Woman to woman. I walked right up to her, invading her personal space. I didn't blink. There is no woman to woman here, I said, my voice low and hard. There is a judge and a litigant. The case is closed. You lost. It's over. But you didn't hear about the feng shui consultant, she pleaded, her voice taking on that wheedling, manipulative tone again. He told me the water feature was blocking my wealth corner. That's why I couldn't pay. The garden literally stopped my cash flow. I stared at her. I looked at the bailiffs, who were trying hard not to roll their eyes. I looked at Mr. Miller, who looked like he was about to faint from sheer exhaustion. Let me explain something to you, I said, pointing a finger directly in her face. Your cash flow stopped because you spent it. Your wealth corner is blocked because you are living a lie. And if you say one more word about feng shui, holism, or vibrations, I will have you held in contempt of court, and you can spend the night in a cell where the only feng shui is a metal toilet and a concrete bench. Do I make myself clear? She recoiled, clutching her pearls. You are so hostile. I am realistic, I snapped. And you know what else I am? I am the person who just saved you from yourself. She blinked, confused. Excuse me? If Mr. Miller had sued you in a regular civil court with lawyers, this would have dragged on for 2 years, I explained, ticking off points on my fingers. You would have paid $50,000 in legal fees. You would have had your financial records subpoenaed publicly. Everyone in Greenwich would know you're broke. I just saved you that humiliation. I gave you a quick death instead of a slow bleed. You should be thanking me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The reality of what I said hit her. The public record, the social circle, the gossip. Now, I continued, turning to Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, do you have your judgment? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Go to the clerk's office, file it immediately, then go home, open a beer, and relax. You did good today. Thank you, Judge, he said, a genuine smile breaking across his tired face. I turned back to Mrs. Sterling. And you, I said, go home, look in the mirror, and try to find something in there that isn't bought, borrowed, or fake. It might take a while. I signaled to the bailiffs. Escort her out. If she resists, call LAPD. That won't be necessary, Mrs. Sterling said, her voice small, icy. She adjusted her sunglasses, putting them back on to hide her eyes. She lifted her chin, trying to summon one last shred of dignity. I am leaving. She turned on her heel and click-clacked down the hallway, her Chanel suit looking a little less bright, her stride a little less confident. I watched her go. Judge, Bird said, coming up beside me. You think she'll pay him? She'll pay, I said confidently, not because it's the right thing to do, but because she's terrified I'll make good on my threat to audit her life. Fear is a wonderful motivator for people who lack a conscience. I turned back to my chambers. Come on, Bird, I'm hungry. Let's get lunch. The hallway was quiet again. The static was gone. The storm had passed. And the truth, as always, was the last thing standing. Epilogue. 6 months later. I don't usually follow up on cases. Once they leave my courtroom, they're out of my life. But every now and then, a letter lands on my desk that catches my eye. This one was in a plain white envelope, no return address. The handwriting was neat, practical, block letters. I opened it. A photo fell out. It was a picture of a garden. Beautiful Japanese maples, their leaves a brilliant red, a stone pathway winding toward a koi pond that sparkled in the sun. And standing in the middle of it, smiling, was Arthur Miller. He was holding a newspaper, pointing to a headline. I picked up the letter. Dear Judge Shainlin, I thought you'd like to know. She paid. It took about 3 weeks of me calling her lawyer every day, reminding them about the transcript you sent to the DA, but the check finally came. It didn't bounce. I paid off my suppliers. I paid off the credit cards. I even took my wife on a weekend trip with the interest money. But here's the kicker. Last week, I saw the Sterling estate in the real estate listings. Bank-owned foreclosure. Apparently, the bank didn't care about the feng shui either. They kicked them out. I stopped by the property yesterday just to look. The new owners are a young couple, nice folks. They asked me who did the landscaping. I told them I did. They hired me on the spot to maintain it. Said it had good energy. Thought you'd get a kick out of that. Thanks again for treating me like I had worth. Sincerely, Arthur Miller. I put the letter down. I looked at the photo. Bank-owned, foreclosure. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of my tea. It wasn't schadenfreude. I don't take pleasure in people's misery, but I do take pleasure in balance. In the scales evening out, Mrs. Sterling had spent her life thinking she was above the consequences. She thought she could float on a cloud of arrogance while people like Arthur Miller held her up. But gravity always wins. Eventually, you run out of other people's money. Eventually, you run out of lies. And eventually, you run into a judge who doesn't care about your Chanel suit. I picked up my pen and went back to work. There was a stack of new cases on my desk. A dog bite in Ohio, an unpaid loan between ex-lovers in Florida, a dispute over a scratched car bumper, people lying, people fighting, people forgetting what matters. And me? I was ready for them. Bird, I yelled out the door. Bring in the next idiots.